and do something a little bit different as we go deeper and have that better relationship with him.
Well, it's good to see all the frozen chosen in the place that are here and all those that are online at home, and grateful that we can gather together. You know, we're wrapping up. This is the last week of the 21 days of prayer and fasting. We always encourage prayer, but we take the first 3 weeks in the year to really lean in and try to take things to another level. I just want to encourage you this last week. Take some extra steps. If you haven't joined us at one of our online prayer times on Tuesday, whether it's 6 a.m. or 9 p.m., join us online. If you haven't come on a Wednesday night, really encourage you. Man, our Wednesday nights have been powerful times. Just the presence of the Lord has just been incredible to come and join us and to take the prayer card, praying through I know we got several hundred of you that are on the opted in to get the text message every day to receive the prayer reminders of what we're praying for together. And I love that God is going to continue to move in us this year. And today, as we're continuing this series that we've been doing on our kind of understanding God's promises. God do promise. So what does that mean? You know, it made me realize that, you know, there are a lot of people in the world today, in our culture today, and we see it probably online a lot, where what they're saying is the term is deconstructing their faith. We've got a lot of people that are deconstructing their faith. And for most people, what that means is it's predominantly millennials using that term, but I've seen a lot of people my age, the Gen Xers and people from all age groups. But what they're saying is I want to pull away from my faith or maybe from my religious upbringing, things that I knew at one point in my life, and I want to maybe examine it a little bit more objectively. And usually deconstructing faith refers to a process for people of examining, push on their Christian beliefs, but mostly it leads towards rejecting them. I think that's usually what people say. I'm working towards rejecting my faith. And I think it's interesting to think, okay, so why is it that people are going through this, what we call deconstruction? And I think really it's driven by disillusionment. There's some sort of disillusionment that happened. For many people, they went through a traumatic experience. There was some sort of trauma that happened in their life, a bad thing, like a legitimately difficult, painful thing. And you start asking, so how can a good God allow something like this to happen to me? How can a good God do this in my life? You have other people that maybe live in an unhealthy church culture where there's just, I know I got a brother that's living kind of in the deeper south, and everybody goes to church, but he's like, they're just all a bunch of hypocrites. That's his take. They talk a lot about moralism and doing these things on Sundays, but they live totally different the rest of the week. It's just one thing Sunday and something the rest of the week. We see a lot of people just pushing like moral standards that no one can hold up to. And then we have leaders in churches, well-known leaders that have just failed, just had miserable, painful, wrong actions that have tried to be hidden. And people are like, well, this is just all fake. There's a sense of injustice that people feel, right? Like how are all these people getting all these good things and I'm dealt with this? This is what I have to deal with. They get all these things and they get all those privileges and they ignore God and I'm suffering pursuing him. A lot of people just go through burnout. They might be really involved in the church. Like 20% of most people are kind of like fully engaged and doing most of the work at church. And they're like, well, what's it for? What do I get out of it? I just get people's attitudes and I just keep picking up the pieces for other people. And there's this what's it in it for me? Why should I go? What's in it for me to have go to church or to have faith? And it just seems like other people are just doing better that don't have this in their life. And it would save up money and save up time and I could do other things. And there is this just real kind of push sometimes to fit in. Worked with the college students for many, many years and interviewed college students in a lot of campuses. And they said the pressure would be legitimate in the classroom with other students and with professors and just go, you don't really believe this, do you? Like you're smarter than that, aren't you? Do you really believe this stuff? And then you look at all the online lifestyles and they're like, oh, we just get a snippet of it, but that looks great. I'd like to do this. And then you try to put that compared to a lot of the shallow teaching that most people get. Like a lot of times we get at church, like either shallow or poor biblical teaching, taking really complex things of this world and the complexities of life and just trying to put them in some Bible bullets and go, pew, 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 just take 3 verses and call me in the morning, and put a little plaque up and just say, well, that should be good because we don't talk about doubts around here. We don't say those things. This is what God has done. Now, for most of people, when they go through that, it's not invited. not looking for it. And it's a painful process where a lot of times things outside of our control, but what I've noticed it does is it isolates people. You go through it and you tend to get isolated, and partly because in the church, we've just not created good spaces for people to talk about these things. Most churches don't feel like they're a safe place to ask hard questions, and so people end up wrestling with things and asking questions and then end up way far away from where they started. In fact, our community here, right in this Cedar Rapids area, the little corridor that we live in, 40% of our community says that they have zero faith affiliation. And they just ask, well, what do you believe? I don't. I don't even think about it. Like, it's just not even on their thought process. Like, 1 out of every 2 people you meet, they're just not even thinking about it. They've just gone to that point. And I'll tell you, that's really where I should be. I look back on my life, and I grew up in a very religious home, grew up in a good religious home where honestly, if I could boil it down to, I was just afraid of God. That's probably what I was taught more than anything, to be fearful of God because he can send you to hell. So be afraid of God. That was just my understanding of my Catholic roots. And I went to Catholic school, and even there were times, I'd be at the school and there was a shortcut down to the cafeteria, but you had to cut through the sanctuary. And I would run through the sanctuary until I got pretty close to where the tabernacle was, where the communion is kept, because that's where Jesus lived. That's what I thought in 4th grade. Right? Jesus lived there. And so if I'm not really good, Jesus is going to strike me as I walk by there, so I'd go really slow and then I'd run again. And then I finally found I had this profound personal experience with Jesus. I found a church that people just loved God and they loved me, and I had a youth pastor who was a single guy in his 30s who was a former hippie, and he just loved life, and he was artistic, and we chased Jesus, had me do some really hard things, and we chased Jesus together, and I was accepted, and I just really found so many good things in that place. And then when I was in college, I was in a Bible college studying the Bible. I want to know the Bible better and all the things that were with it. Found out my sophomore year that he had left the church, he had left ministry, and he announced he was gay and leaving God altogether. And then at the same time, I was realizing that, there were a couple of my professors, they were well-known speakers, and all over the country, people sought them out. Thousands of people would hear them, and they always talked about they were each other's armor bearer. They're going to hold each other accountable and watch each other's back, and it came out that both of them were having affairs. And just in one marriage broke up, and he married the younger girl that his secretary that he was seeing, and then there were some nationally known leaders about that time that came out. And I'm just looking at all this and I'm like, what the heck? Like, if none of these people can make it, why should I even try? Like, what's even worth it? Like, these are the people that brought me where I was, and if they can't make it, how can I make it? I'm looking at some of my high school friends that we went to youth group together, and a few of them had walked away from the Lord and are doing really well. Like, they're doing great in college, and they're making money and having fun, and inside I'm like, having sex and drinking and just pursuing money and status, I think that would be okay. Why am I giving all those things up? I just think this is just done, and I just wrestled with it for months in my life. And then you hear verses like in Hebrews 10:23, it says, let's hold tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm. For God can be trusted to keep his promises. And I'm like, really? Really? He can be trusted to keep his promises? With all these other things that are happening, is this even? But I had no one that I could go to talk about it. I was trying to wrestle, like, who in my life can I talk through these things with? Who can I be honest about some of the things that are happening in my life? Because it kind of seemed like if you question things, like doubting disqualifies your faith. It disqualifies you from God working in your life. And what I want to say today is I want to make a declaration that here at Radiant Church, that is not our culture here. It's not our culture here at Radiant Church. At Radiant Church, we believe that doubts can be a healthy part of your faith journey. That it's actually okay to ask hard questions. That it's okay to lean into the things that are difficult in our lives. I know some people say, it's dangerous to be able to talk through those things and to be independent in your thinking. But we need to develop a place that's safe, a place that's healthy, where people can wrestle with God. You see, that's why I love this book. That's why I love the Bible, because the Bible isn't, when you read the Bible, it isn't a God said it, you must believe it, or you're going to hell. That's not what the story is written. The Bible isn't written that way. It's actually a collection of stories of people fighting with God, of people wrestling with their faith, of wrestling with the realities of a broken world, and where does he fit in? You got Jacob, who literally is fighting with God all night long. You promised, you promised, you promised, you promised, you promised. You've got Job, who is blessed by God by taking everything away from him but God, and he's got to wrestle, and his wife tells him to curse God and die. You've got Elijah, who just did this miraculous work, and now he's in depression and doubting, and he's like, nobody else is doing this, so why should I even bother doing this? You got Noah, who just went through the flood. Like that should be kind of get your attention to who God is and he's powerful, and at the end of it, he's just sitting in a drunken stupor questioning life and the purpose of life. You've got the 12 disciples that after following Jesus, they're all like, well, what the heck just happened? He just died. Where do we go now? Well, we better hide or something because we don't know. And Thomas, who gets just an incredibly bad rap, they call him Doubting Thomas because that's a bad thing to be a doubter. Like that's kind of come across. And then most of Paul's writings are written to people who are struggling. They're like wrestling with things. And so if you really want to know how to wrestle with faith and wrestle with doubts in a healthy way, the great way to turn is to the Psalms. That's why I love the Psalms. And when you read through the Psalms, 40% of the Psalms are calling God to account. They're just saying, God, where are you? I don't know what's going on here. This doesn't seem right. And another 30% of them are dealing with those topics of questions and pain and trauma and doubt. Really, like 70% of the Psalms are what we could label laments. And it's a biblical term, but what a lament is literally someone screaming at God. Like this, it's emotional. It's meant to be emotional. That God, there's just something you failed at. There's something going on here. Like these aren't like passive little, sweet little, now I lay me down to sleep. Some of these Psalms, there's emotion and passion behind it. And where are you, God? You promised. I don't even know if I can really trust you. What I want you to do today, I want you to take your Bibles, whether paper and I want everyone to turn to Psalm 73. We're going to go through the whole Psalm. And Psalm 73, and this is why as we're coming into this year, we're having notes available. Some of you are paper note takers. Encourage you to take them and wrestle with some things, or online. We've got it in our app or on the Bible app, places for notes. But as we look into a psalm, a couple of things just to remember, just little nerdy pieces, but Hebrew poetry is beautiful poetry, but it's very different than English poetry. Right? English poetry is about rhyming and kind of a little bit of a rhythm, whereas in Hebrew poetry, it's about structure. How they structure things. Most of Hebrew poetry is what we call parallelism, where you got two lines that are connected. It'll do this line, and then it'll do this line, and it'll do this line, and it'll do this line. And there's a parallel thought or an antithetical thought between them to make a point. Many of them are written what's called a chiasm, where it's kind of like it builds up to a center point, and then it unpacks what it just built up before. But the middle point is where it holds some weight, and it's got some power to it. And it uses very concise, vivid imagery to create emotional pictures because it's very emotional in the way it's describing things. And what I love about Psalm 73, even where it's positioned in the Psalms, like it's the beginning of book 3, there's 5 books in the Psalms, and so the beginning of book 3, it's the middle book in the Psalms, and in Hebrew poetry, things in the middle carry a little bit of weight. And so to be the first psalm in this point, there's some weight to this psalm. And what I love is I think as we read through this is helping us get a glimpse of how people have battled with doubts for thousands of years. I'm going to read it. Let's read along together, and we'll walk through this whole passage together. Verse 1. Truly God is good to Israel, for those whose hearts are pure. But as for me, I almost lost my footing. My feet were slipping and I was almost gone, for I envied the proud when I saw them prosper despite their wickedness. Starts off right away like, I'm not as faithful as the rest of my church friends. I'm looking at some people around me and going, I think they've got life a little bit better than me. They seem to live such painless lives. Their bodies are so healthy and strong. They don't have troubles like these other people. They're not plagued with problems like everyone else. They wear pride like a jeweled necklace, and they clothe themselves with cruelty. These fat cats, which is actually a great translation, they have everything their hearts could ever wish for. They scoff and speak only evil. In their pride, they seek to crush others. They boast against the very heavens, and their words strut throughout the earth. Like these elite, it just seems to be injustice here. Like they're so elite, they've got everything. It kind of sounds like people today, right? The elites. If I had money, maybe my life would be a little bit easier. People say, well, they say money can't buy me happiness, but everybody says, but I'd like to be the one that tries and to prove them wrong or whatever. Like he's just wrestling with this. He's frustrated. Verse 10. And so the people, they're dismayed. And they're confused, and they're drinking in all their words. What does God know, they ask? Does the Most High even know what's happening? Is he even around? Is he just off in a distance somewhere? Is he even real? Like, look at these wicked people enjoying a life of ease while their riches just multiply. Like there is a bluntness here, right? God, this is ridiculous. I think you're missing something. Did I keep my heart pure for nothing? Did I keep myself innocent for no reason? I get nothing but trouble all day long. Every morning brings me pain. That's it. I'm done. The author brings it up to this point. This is the conclusion. And the conclusion is, God, you failed. You're fired. I'm done. Like you have obviously failed. That's just what I see when I look around. I thought you promised that if we follow you, good things happen. So either there, God, you're not good, or you're a liar, or you're not even real. That's his complaint. All right, it's just speaking it bluntly here. And then in verse 15 it says, and if I'd really spoken this way to other people, if I really talked to other people about what I'm thinking, I would be a traitor to your people. So I tried to understand why the wicked prosper, but this is a difficult task. The problem is there's no safe place for me to talk about it. If I say this to anybody, they're like, well, you're a traitor. Well, you're not a real person who follows God. You're not really belonging. Like they'll shame you. They'll shut you out, and they can't see anything. And so the author's just like, well, this just sucks. I don't even know what to do with it. And this was me in downtown Minneapolis as I'm walking home from work. And I've been working in downtown Minneapolis. It's about 5 o'clock rush hour. And I'm walking over one of the overpasses where there's literally 1,000 cars that are visible in my sight. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, God, if you're real, all this other stuff's happening, and then all these people don't care about you. You're just going to let them all go to hell, and that's just no big deal to you? So I just don't even, I'm like, I'm done. I don't know where else to go. And that's where the author is here in this moment. But what I love at this point, see, remember, Hebrew poetry is about structure, and this is the lament, and it's got a chiastic structure. What it's doing is building up to something. And at the very middle, it's harder to see when we translate it to English, but in the very middle comes this verse in verse 17, this one little line, this one little phrase, and it just says, then I went into your sanctuary, O God. We don't know what happened in the sanctuary. We don't know if it was a real sanctuary. We don't know if it was a metaphysical sanctuary. All we know is I went one more time to where I was supposed to go to meet you. I just went to the spot where you're supposed to be. Continues in verse 17. It says, then I finally understood the destiny of the wicked. Truly, you put them on a slippery path and send them sliding over the cliff to destruction. In an instant, they were destroyed, completely swept away by terrors. When you arise, O Lord, you will laugh at their silly ideas, as a person laughs at dreams in the morning. We don't know what happened, but something happens that his perspective changes. Right? Nothing changes in his circumstances. His circumstances are the same, but his perspective shifts. Then I realized that my heart was bitter, and I was all torn up inside. I was so foolish and ignorant. I must have seemed like a senseless animal to you. Yet I still belong to you. You hold my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, leading me to a glorious destiny. Like he brings out his bitterness and his pain that he had just pointed out, right? It's on one side, now it's back on the other side, but you're still kind to me. You're still gracious to me. You still have mercy. And so whom have I in heaven but you? I desire you more than anything on earth. My health may fail. My spirit may grow weak. But God remains the strength of my heart. He's mine forever. Right? In the beginning, God, you failed. Now he's realizing, oh, wait, he didn't fail. I just didn't see it. Those who desert him will perish, for you destroy those who abandon you. But as for me, how good it is to be near God. I have made the sovereign Lord my shelter, and I will tell everyone about the wonderful things you do. Right? He no longer doubts the goodness of God. Or again, his circumstances didn't change, but something in his life did. And I want to look at, so how do we learn from this? So when we're facing those doubts, when we're in those moments, when we're struggling with a traumatic experience, or we're struggling with unanswered prayers, or people around us having failures or issues or complexities of questions, what do we do and how do we handle those doubts? And the first thing is you need to ask the questions. Ask them. Say them. Don't hide them. Don't bury them. Questions and doubts will never be detrimental to your relationship with God. You can never ask God a question that's going to say, whoa, that's a little too far, and he's going to push you away and not be closer. Because if God is truth, then anyone seeking truth is going to find him. And so he's like, ask the question, seek me. I love what Oswald Chambers says. Doubt is not always a sign that a man is wrong. It just may be a sign that he's thinking. Like it's okay to ask complicated things, to wrestle with complicated issues, right? The complexities of life are complicated. I think more than anything, you need to be careful with people that say that they've got God all wrapped up in a box, right? That they're overly dogmatic and this is the way it has to be and this is the way it should be. And I would encourage you to be cautious with people like that because they will be just as quick to put you in a box and wanted to control you as they are to put God in a box and control him, because God can't be boxed. And so it's okay to ask the questions. It's okay to wrestle with things. He's bigger than our understanding. He created us in such a way and he gave us free will, and free will allows us to ask the questions. So ask the questions. And number two, acknowledge the bitterness and the disappointment. If life hurts, it really is okay to say, God, this hurts. This isn't enjoyable. It's okay to bring this to him. I can tell you over the years, if God were one that would push us away from being honest, I have had many screaming matches at God, as the Psalms have. There are many times, and even when I was younger, there were many holes in basement walls and other walls that had to be patched at different points because I was so frustrated with things and I didn't know how to process it and talk about it, but I knew I needed to get it out. I couldn't keep it in, and we need to be able to bring things out, because whenever you hide pain and you hide questions, it never helps a relationship. All right, if you're married, you don't hide the pain and hide the questions from your spouse. You got to talk about those things, because doubts are not the enemy of your faith, but they're really simply a doorway to a deeper conversation. They open up a conversation with you, between you and God, to go, hey, there's something deeper in here. I'm struggling with this. I'm disappointed. There's some bitterness and some disappointment. If you just keep those hidden, it just becomes toxic and moldy. Right? It's like mold growing in a house behind. Like, don't let it grow there. Expose it. Bring it out. Acknowledge it. Talked a couple weeks ago about a season that we went through and just real difficulty. And I was in my doctoral cohort. Right? I'm with all these people who are brilliant in the word and brilliant in chasing Jesus. And there was one particular class session that we were walking through and we were talking about spiritual warfare, and I just lost it. Because we were in the season where I'm like, the enemy is attacking my family. And I gave up everything for God. I paid so many things. I let all these things, and all this is happening. Where's God in this? Like, how fair is this? And I'm just bawling. They're guttural tears. There's like snot everywhere. And what I loved is I had friends in that group that just came alongside of me, and there was no judgment. They're like, we're just going to be with you. We're just going to sit with you. We're just going to pray with you. We're going to encourage you, because that's why number 3, it's so important to lean into healthy companions. You got to lean into healthy companions in this journey. Too often we try to do this on our own. Right? And we talk about a healthy culture. Like the psalmist is like, I don't know if I can talk to anybody about this. They're going to say I'm a traitor, that I don't get it. And it's no. You've got to talk to other people about it and bring healthy relationships. Here's what I've seen in our situation right now, why so many people are deconstructing, is what's fascinating is how many people are going, when they're having questions, is they're turning to a YouTube channel of somebody else who has done an autopsy on their faith that has no relationship with them, and going, oh, that's the answer. Someone that doesn't know them, doesn't care for them, but you turn to a YouTube channel of a stranger that you don't know where they've been or how they've wrestled with, instead of turning to someone who loves you, turning to someone who cares for you, turning for someone who wants to see the best for you. And I watched that. Someone really close to me that turned to Rhett and Link, or two very popular YouTubers, and did a faith deconstruction. And I didn't get any other opinions, just got their opinions through the process. But we got to remember, life is a journey. And so who are you bringing on your journey with you? And in fact, your faith is a journey, not a destination. The goal isn't to get everything figured out, it's to go on a journey together. This is why we offer Alpha here at Radiant Church. Alpha is such an important part. You heard about it a little bit ago. We'll keep talking to you about it. Our goal is for everyone to go through Alpha. It's part of the process in our culture, and where it's here just to ask the questions. Just be okay to ask questions, just talk. Be with people that care for you, that allow you to wrestle with things. And I know the first couple times we offered Alpha, people are like, but what's the answer? And we're like, keep asking the question. It's okay. Because the goal of your faith is not to get all of your thinking right. The goal of your faith is to walk with Jesus. I want you to walk with Jesus. Right now, I want to challenge you, if you're having these doubts, so just really, who is there in your life that's willing to listen with you? Not necessarily correct you, but willing to walk with you. Because what it'll do is then it'll lead you to what was the most important spot in this passage, in this psalm. It is the same for us. It got to that point, and you and I, when he says, I went to God's sanctuary, more than anything, you just need to seek his presence. Just seek God's presence. When you're doubting, when you're struggling, when you're wrestling with things, God is a relational God. He went to the cross to deal with death and hell and the grave, to remove any barrier between you and him, because he wants to be with you. So I'm standing on this bridge, and I'm watching all these cars, and I'm just having this anger moment. I'm so frustrated with everything that's happening and all these other people that have just failed and all the problems. And I'm just like, I don't think it's worth it. And I can't put words to it. I can barely describe it. And it was like, I'm calling God to an account. And in the middle of a bridge in downtown Minneapolis, I can still tell you the spot on the sidewalk I was standing when this happened. The sanctuary of the Lord, the presence of the Lord just became real. And in a moment, I could see God's perspective. And every car had a soul that he loved and he wept over. I didn't have words for this. I couldn't rationalize it. I couldn't put it into a perspective. And I'm telling you, like 45 minutes later, I'm still standing in this same spot in the presence of God. Everybody still failed. All the problems were still there. All my desires were still there. Towards the end of that time, God just nudged me on my heart, and he just whispered, so Brian, is your faith in other people, or is your faith in me? Are you in this to follow other people, or are you in this to follow me? I had to come to a conclusion. I'm like, okay, who am I following? What is my faith in? And in those moments to be able to, right, you got to understand God, and we see it throughout the scripture, right? God rarely gives a logical argument or a defense, but he always offers himself. When you read through the word, like when Job's answering God, why am I going through all this stuff? And what does God say? I am. Can you hold out the stars? He just offers himself. And Jacob wrestling with God all night, like, God, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair. God just dislocates his hip, causes pain for the rest of his life, and says, I'm going to change your name to God fights for you. God fights for you. Thomas, who gets such a bad rap, right, because of doubting Thomas. And the truth is, Thomas shows back up and shows into the room, and Jesus just like, Thomas, okay, come on. He's not always offering us all the answers, but he will offer himself to you. The problem is most people never go back to God and seek him and put him to the test. He says throughout the Bible, put him to the test. Like right here at Radiant Church, I'm just going to be honest, we are not here to argue you into belief. I'm not here to try to change your mind, to catch you in some little logical argument, because I know more than anything else, and I can do that. Like, I got enough things. I see and wrestle, and you know, we're going to look at things, how the brain's wired and all. Like, I love those things, but ultimately, I want you just to experience the presence of God. Because when you experience the presence of God, he's the only one that can change our lives. That's why our every service will end with an altar call, and it's a simple one. It's not overly complicated, because I want God to do what he can only do in your heart. That if you the Bible just says, if you A, B, C, right? Admit that I can't do this on my own. Believe, try to wrestle with, is he who he says he is, that he went to the cross and dealt with this so I can be with him and I can choose him. He goes, now come follow me. That's what he wants in each of our lives, because once we encounter him, we learn a little bit more, trust his character. So when we're doubting and we experience his presence, lean into his character. The reason you can bring your doubts to God is because he is eternally faithful and he's eternally loving. I love what it says in Psalm 56, where he keeps track of my sorrows. He's collected all my tears in a bottle. All those times I've just been, God, I don't get this. I don't understand. I'm wrestling with. He's got all of them. He remembers every one of those conversations. He remembers every one of those moments. And to think that he does that for me, and he does that for you, and he does that for that. That is who he is. He is grace, and he puts all things right, and he puts justice in the right place. This is why you, when you're doubting, keep the main thing the main thing. Don't get so distracted on all these other issues. So people are like, oh, well, what about this issue? And what about that issue? And what about how many angels can dance on the pin of it? And how long can you go before God kicks you out and he's not loving you? Where's that line of where salvation happens? And how about this denomination or that denomination? Either he is the Savior or he's not. Start there. Anchor yourself to him. Understand that he is who he says he is. And when that happens, right, that then we can gain his perspective. Things start to shift in our lives, and we get a perspective that's more of an eternal perspective. Remember, God is dealing with things from an eternal perspective, and yet your part is important. One of the things that when I first read through this psalm and really studied it, was the picture that got to me, and this really worked for me. I was thinking of like a tapestry. Right, you know, a sewn picture where it's detail and it's sewn. They did a lot of them in the medieval times, and they would do artwork by. Now we get like the computer does it for us, and we just put the color in the right spot. You know, it's still fun. My wife likes to do those things, but it was like intricate details. Most of us approach life. We got to understand we only see the backside of that tapestry. We see the loose strings and the chaotic colors and all the pieces and we only see our little part of our life. That's all we see, that we see those things and we're like, God, where are you in this? Like you said, you're knitting something together that's beautiful and powerful. But what the psalmist is saying is I went to the Lord and it's like, God, for a second, turn that around And I saw, oh, I'm part of a much bigger picture. That he's weaving some things together that are beautiful and intricate. And I only see my one little part of an eye and the one person that's in that corner, but he sees it all. And he cares for all of it, and every detail matters to him. And I look at my life, and I look at evil, and I look at manipulative people, and I look at the chaos and the unpredictability and all that I see. But when I flip it around, I realize it says in Psalms that your unfailing love, O God, is as vast as the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches beyond the clouds. He just has a much bigger picture. And when we do those things, we need to keep our faith in action. It's the final part of what the psalmist does here, right? Because a lot of times when people doubt what they do is they move away from doing the things that are the most important for them to do. They stop loving, stop going to church, stop being around people, not necessarily loving, but loving unconditionally and trying to fight for those things that we try to do. But as we grow and mature, we struggle with those things, and we have to learn how to put the right things into action. I love Os Guinness gave a picture of this principle, and he put it this way. He said, the question the doubter often doesn't ask is whether or not faith is useless, or is my faith simply not used? Is my faith useless, or is my faith just not being used? He says it's kind of like, think of it like a boy on a bike. And the boy keeps complaining because every time he sits on the bike, it just falls over. And he goes and he sits on the bike and it falls over, and he sits on the bike and it falls over. And wouldn't most of us go, well, if you're just gonna go sit on the bike, it's better that you just go sit on a chair. Because a chair is meant for sitting, a bike is meant to be put into motion, to be put into action. He says faith isn't just for sitting, faith is for putting it into action. There's things that we have to do, put some weight on it, put some motion to it. And faith must be used or it becomes useless. Right? Faith isn't the absence of doubt. Faith is the means to travel through your doubts. Thomas, he's doubting, right? Gets that bad rap. But he was committed. Goes to India, gives his life because he put it into action. So when you're struggling with your doubts, don't just sit down. And quit trying and to do it on your own and isolate yourself. Ask the questions. Be honest with your hurt. Be honest with the pain. Find people who care about you and let you ask the questions. And more than anything, seek his presence. Seek his presence. Put him to the test. Work to find him. Lean on his character. All right? Ask to see things from his perspective. And God says all the time, put me to the test. Start pedaling the bike. Put some things into motion, right? Over the years, I've struggled and wrestled and been honest with God. And God, I've had those moments. But all it's done is it's brought me deeper and deeper in understanding who he is. In fact, the strongest faith is a faith that grows through your doubts. Doesn't avoid your doubts. Doesn't minimize them. It grows through them. So if you have doubts, will you bring them to Jesus? If you have pain and hurt and disappointment, and whether it's in church or in the world, bring it to Jesus. If you have questions, bring them to Jesus. If you have baggage and addictions in your life, just keep bringing it to Jesus. Faith is not the absence of doubt, right? Faith is what helps us get through the doubt, to get us to Jesus. Doubt should never lead us to a dead end. It should always lead us to keep moving, to keep trusting, to keep being dependent upon the one who is the source of all good things. That he truly can be trusted with everything. Let's pray. So Jesus, we come together today and we just thank you that you are not pushed off by our worries, our questions. In fact, you welcome them. You open up your arms and say, will you just come to me? All who are weary and heavy with life. You said that even though when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you're still with us. That you're always with us in those circumstances. Thank you, God, that you are putting something together that's far beyond what we can fully understand. But I just pray that there'd be many that are here today, many that are watching online, that would take a moment and just say, Lord, I think I need to go back to your sanctuary, back to you one more time. And just say for many of you that are here today, if you're in a spot where you're just like, maybe today was like, I'll give it one more chance. It's no accident that you're here. Because God wants to be present with you. And I just want to encourage you, if you're going through difficulties, if you're going through things that you're not sure how to put into words, or just you're at that point where you're looking at the injustice in the world, you're looking at the difficulties, and is it worth it? To just say, Jesus, I just want to be in your presence. God, can I just be in your presence? Will you just make yourself close to me? I know you are, but may I be aware of your work? May I sense what you're doing? Don't isolate yourself. Lean into other people. Come to Alpha this next season. Come find a place to get connected. Look at opportunities of people that you can ask those questions with, that'll journey with you. And as a church, that we could continue to create that safe place for everyone who's coming and seeking to find. Because when you seek, you will find, because He is opening the door to say, come in. So if you're here today and you're just maybe saying, Pastor Brian, I'm not really sure. I'm not sure what to do with all this. I'm not sure if I have enough faith. I'm not sure if I really understand this. Can I just say it? The Bible makes it really clear. Jesus makes it abundantly clear that He would do whatever it takes to be with you and have a relationship with you. That you need to simply admit that you don't have it all figured out. Begin to believe and put some weight in the fact that He is who He says He is. That Jesus did, the main thing is that He defeated death and hell and the grave by going to the cross, paying the penalty for all the things that have kept us separated from God, that have broken our ability to have the full spiritual and life to the fullest, and that He rose again. His resurrection is what sealed the deal, that He's the one that holds all things together, and that we simply choose Him. And He says, okay, now let's walk through life together. That's the best place that you can be. Just saying a simple prayer, just saying, Jesus, I don't know, I'm struggling. But I know that I'm struggling, and I know that I have these feelings and these questions, but I trust that you are who you say you are. And I want to be in your presence, and I want to be with you. And your word says, you have told us that you want to be with me even more. So forgive me, and I choose you.